The Story of Civilization, Part 2, The Life of Greece, being a history of Greek civilization from the beginnings, and of civilization in the Near East from the death of Alexander to the Roman conquest, with an introduction on the prehistoric culture of Crete by Durant. Chapter 20, Letters and Arts in the 4th Century. Section 2, Isocrates. This duel of oratory has been loudly lauded and devoutly studied in every generation, but in truth it represents almost the matter of Athenian politics. We cannot see nobility in this street corner contest in vituperation. This means quarrel for public praise between two secret recipients of born gold. Isocrates is a little more attractive and carries down into the 4th century something of the grandeur of the 5th. Born in 436 BCE, he lived till 338 and died with Greek liberty. His father had made a fortune by manufacturing flutes. He gave his son every educational advantage, even sending him to study rhetoric with Gorgias in Thessaly. The Peloponnesian War and the example of Alcibiades ruined the flute business and destroyed the family fortune. Isocrates had to go forth and earn his living by the sweat of his pen. He began by writing speeches for others, and thought of becoming an orator, but he suffered from shyness and a weak voice, and a strong distaste for the crudities of public strife. He abominated the demagogues who had captured the assembly, and shrank for a time into the quiet pedagogic life. In 391, he opened the most successful of Athenian schools of rhetoric. Students came to him from all the Greek world. Perhaps their variety of origin and outlook helped to form his pan-Hellenic philosophy. He thought that all other teachers were on the wrong track. In a pamphlet against the sophists, he denounced both those who professed to turn any numbskull into a pundit for 3 or 4 minas, and those who, like Plato, hoped to prepare men for government by training them in science and metaphysics. As for himself, he admitted that he could get results only when the student possessed some natural talent. He would not teach metaphysics or science, for these, he argued, were hopeless inquiries into insoluble mysteries. Nevertheless, he gave the name of philosophy to the instruction provided in his school. The curriculum centered upon the arts of writing and speaking, but these were taught in connection with literature and politics. Isocrates offered, as we should say, a cultural course as opposed to the mathematical course given in Plato's academy. The art of speech was the goal, as being then the chief medium of public advancement. The Athenian state was governed by argument, so Isocrates taught his pupils the use of words, how to arrange them in the clearest order, in rhythmic but not metrical sequence, in polished but not ornate dictation, in smooth transitions of sound and thought, in balanced clauses and cumulative periods. Such prose, he believed, would please the refined ear as much as poetry. Isocrates and most Greek writers after him counted it a literary sin to end one word and begin the next with a vowel. Hawaiian, that would have been even more difficult, right? Out of this school came many leaders of the Demosthenic age. Timotheus, the general, Ephorus and Theopompus, the historians, Isaeus, Lycurgus, Hyperides, and Aeschines, the orators, Theusippus, the successor of Plato, and some say Aristotle himself. Isocrates was not content with forming great men. He wished to play some part in the affairs of his time. Unable to be either an orator or a statesman, he became a pamphleteer. He addressed long speeches to the Athenian public, to leaders like Philip, or to the assembled Greeks at the Pan-Hellenic Games. Instead of delivering these, he published them, and thereby unconsciously invented the essay as a literary form. 29 of his discourses remain and rank among the most interesting survivals of Greek antiquity. His first and greatest pronouncement, the Panegyricus, so named because addressed to the Panegyris, our General Assembly, Pan-Agora of the Greeks, at the 100th Olympiad, struck the theme of all his thought, the theme of his old master Gorgias, a call to Greece to forget its little sovereignties and become a state. Isocrates was a proud Athenian. So far has our city distanced the rest of mankind in thought and speech that her pupils have become the teachers of all the world. But he was a prouder Greek. To him, as to the Hellenistic age, Hellenism meant not membership in a race, but participation in a culture, and that culture, he felt, was the finest that men had yet created anywhere. But all around this culture were barbarians in Italy, Sicily, Africa, Asia, and what we should now call the Balkans. It saddened him to see the barbarians becoming stronger, and Persia consolidating her control of Ionia, while the Greek states consumed themselves in civil war. For many as are the ills that are incident to the nature of man, we have by ourselves invented more than those that nature lays upon us by engendering wars and factions among ourselves. Against these ills no one has ever protested, and people are not ashamed to weep over the calamities that have been fabricated by the poets, while they view complacently the real sufferings, the many terrible sufferings that result from our state of war, and they are so far from feeling pity that they even rejoice more in each other's sorrows than in their own blessings. If the Greeks must fight, why not fight a real enemy? Why not drive the Persians back to their plateau? A small detachment of Greeks, he prophesied, would defeat a large army of Persians. Such a holy war might at last give unity to Greece, and the choice was between Greek unity or triumphant barbarism. Well, what happened with the Jews? Sure, the Maccabees drove out who they drove out. You know, Judaism was historically mentioned for the first time in the second book of Maccabees. And then you had the Bar Kokhba revolt, which kind of aligned with the Heliacal rising of the two fish of Pisces, right? Which is interesting enough. But again, did they put in this just empire that's totally for the people as a whole? No. Things got replaced with the same tyrants as before. And, you know, they were replaced as leaders. 2 years after publishing this appeal, 378 BCE, Isocrates, turning theory into practice, toured the Aegean with his ex-pupil Timotheus and helped to formulate the terms of the Second Athenian Confederacy. The rise and fall of this new hope of unity formed one more disappointment in his long life. In a brave and vigorous pamphlet on the peace, he condemned Athens for again corrupting an alliance into an empire, and called upon her to sign a peace that would assure every Greek state against the Athenian encroachments. What we call empire is in reality misfortune, for by its very nature it depraves all who have to do with it. Imperialism, he said, has ruined democracy by teaching Athenians to live on foreign tribute. Losing that, they now wish to live on state contributions, and exalted to the highest offices those who promised them most. Now, America has this vast overabundance of resources, and we're kind of taught that we need foreign workers and foreign interest and stuff in order to. No, we got more than enough, even for the world, in this country. And, but, it's part of a bigger system, right? And of course now, state contributions, people want a universal basic income rather than what they had 50 years ago, and people relatively earned enough that they could take care of their whole family on one wage, And, there's more of the public office than, your own vested interest. But, whenever you deliberate on the business of the state, you distrust and dislike men of superior intelligence, and cultivate instead the most depraved of the orators who come before you. You prefer those who are drunk to those who are sober, those who are witless to those who are wise, and those who dole out the public money to those who perform public services at their own expense. In his next address, the Areopagiticus, he spoke more leniently of democracy. We sit around in our shops denouncing the present order. Says a timeless passage, but we perceive that even badly constituted democracies are responsible for fewer disasters than our oligarchies. Had not Sparta made a worse mistress for Greece than Athens had been? And have not we all of us, because of the madness of the 30, become greater enthusiasts for democracy than those who occupied Thala, Thrasybulus, Anatus, and other restorers of democracy in 404 BCE? But Athens had ruined itself by carrying to excess the principles of liberty and equality, by training the citizens in such fashion that they looked upon insolence as democracy, lawlessness as liberty, impudence of speech as equality, and license to do what they pleased as happiness. All men are not equal, and should not be equally free to hold office. The institution of the lot, Isocrates felt, had lowered disastrously the level of Athenian statesmanship. Better than this mob rule was the chemocracy of Solon and Cleisthenes. For then amiable ignorance and eloquent venality had less chance of being raised to leadership. Able men rose naturally to the top, and the Areopagus, receiving them after the term of office, became automatically the mature brain of the state. In 346 BCE, when Athens had come to terms with Philip, Isocrates, now 90, addressed an open letter to the Macedonian king. He foresaw that Philip would make himself master of Greece, and begged him to use his power not as a tyrant, but as the unifier of autonomous Greek states, in a war for the liberation of Greece from the king's peace, and of Ionia from Persian rule. The war party denounced the letter as a surrender to despotism, and for 7 years Isocrates held his pen. He spoke once more in 339 BCE, addressing his pamphlet to the Greeks who were gathering for the Panathenaic Games. The Panathinaikos is a weak and prolix repetition of the Panegyricus. The style trembles in the old man's hand, but it is an astonishing performance for one who was only 3 years short of a century. Then in 338 BCE came Chaeronea. Athens was defeated, but Isocrates' dream of a unified Greece was about to come true. A late Greek tradition says that when the news came, he forgot about Philip and unity, and thought only of his native city humiliated. The days of her glory ended, and that, at the age of 98, having at last lived long enough, he starved himself to death. We do not know if this is true, but Aristotle tells us that within 5 days after Tyrannia, Isocrates was dead. Well, perhaps he starved to death, not on purpose, but some other way.